you are tasting or drinking a natural wine. And one of the reasons is, well, we use this kind of umbrella, broad generalized term. It's this actual natural wine isn't kind of legally defined or doesn't have any global oversight committee on how exactly it is used. But from all of my research and reading and experience with doing some natural wine webinars in the past, essentially it can be kind of condensed down into wines that are made from grapes that were farmed either sustainably, organically, or biodynamically. And we'll touch a little bit on each of those, where they might overlap and where they would be different as we go through here. So the wines are made, some people prefer the term transformed, without adding or removing too many elements in the cellar. Now there are occasions when you might need to do minor additions or subtractions, but in general, that is the approach. And human intervention is kept to a minimum as well, so no excessive fining or filtration of the wines. The idea is that then takes them away from their natural state. And the opposite of natural in this instance, I wouldn't say is unnatural. It's not that these wines are made from things that aren't considered to be true wine. They're made with grapes, they're made with yeast. They go through their fermentations and all of the natural steps or typical usual steps for making wine. But perhaps they are not farmed in these ways that I mentioned. Maybe there's a little bit more intervention in the winery. And so, depending on who you ask, that could not be labeled as a natural wine. And also the term of kind of a living wine is used because, yeah, the wine is very much, it comes from living things. It goes through these very organic processes, and so it has a personality, it has a life. So I am going to just touch on this very, very briefly because I think the sulfites discussion or the mentality about it and the opinions is really quite negative. Often I have students in my introductory classes saying, what is giving me that headache? I'm pretty sure it's sulfites, or I'm pretty sure it's this or that. And really no definitive evidence exists that the sulfites are indeed what is causing wine headaches. Usually if you have a wine headache, it's alcohol or a little bit of dehydration, and that's not judging. We've all been there, but it's can't really be blamed on this any one thing. And in fact, it doesn't relate so much even to champagnes because champagnes require a little bit of a smaller amount. The CO2 that is present in the wines do help preserve the wine as it rests or as it's waiting to be consumed, which is just one of the contributing factors to why champagnes can be so long-lived. So just had to kind of glaze over that. And then let's get into really what it means, natural winemaking or sustainability is a big term that is used in the Champagne AOC now. And in fact, I have a video that I think, seeing some of the visuals does better justice than just me explaining them to you. So I'm gonna just quickly remove myself from here and show you. Oops, here it is. We'll go back to that in a moment. There we go. So just enjoy, pretend like you are there in the vineyards of Champagne. So perhaps sip on your glass.
As part of its quest for excellence in every aspect of the production, since the early 2000s, the Champagne region has undertaken an environmental assessment of the entire industry and has set up a sustainable development initiative based around 3 components: its biodiversity, carbon, and water footprints.
Okay, yeah, I hear we can't see the video, guys. I'm really sorry about that. There we go. I'm so sorry. I realize it's been a while since I shared it.
Having firstly surveyed and identified the plant and animal species of particular interest from an aesthetic, heritage, agronomic, and functional perspective, a conservation plan was put in place. Planting grassy embankments, shrub hedgerows, wildflower fallow fields, and trees is conducive to floral diversity, attracting pollinating insects, birds, and small mammals, and combating soil erosion. This has been accompanied by a drive to blend production facilities into the landscape more effectively. All these efforts help to conserve biodiversity and enhance the landscape. Careful water management is a must, both in the vineyards and the cellars. In the vineyards, agrochemicals have given way to agronomics in order to reduce runoff, erosion, and pollution of surface waters. The emphasis is placed on tilling the soil, ploughing, cover crops, sustainable plant nutrition, and protection of the vineyards. Champagne is among Europe's leaders in the development of sexual confusion techniques aimed at limiting the number of caterpillars, which are especially destructive to vines. The region has also invested heavily in hydraulic infrastructure on the hillsides in order to channel rainwater to improve its penetration into the soil or drain it away to prevent gully erosion. Wineries are focused on reducing water use and managing effluents. These effluents, which are generated when the facilities, pressing and winemaking equipment are cleaned, are 100% reprocessed. The grape pomace and lees are used to make potable alcohol, biofuel, cattle feed, organic soil enricher, and a range of products such as colorants, polyphenols, grapeseed oil, and essential oils. As the first region to have calculated its carbon footprint in 2003, Champagne has implemented a greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan covering the entire industry: wine growing, enology, transport, buildings, purchasing, and services. The first measures, which include reducing bottle weight, sustainable biomass management, reducing inputs, and eco-friendly construction, have already significantly cut the carbon footprint of every bottle. The Champagne growers are striving to make wine growing 100% environmentally friendly in order to pass on to future generations a heritage that is truly worthy of the appellation.
To the presentation here. So yeah, this slide does a nice summary of that, but the video itself it's great to see kind of the examples of biodiversity, the insects, the animals, how they're managing their use of water, mentioning how they're going to reuse the pumice and showing cover crops or the growth in between the rows. There's just a lot of different things that you can be doing in the vineyard to make yourself sustainable. And I'll, as I promised, I will kind of define a little bit more the difference between that just pure organic and then the biodynamic and sustainable as we go on. But over here you see, these statistics aren't 100% current for 2020. They were compiled a couple of years ago, but what you see is the number of houses, how many growers, how many hectares are planted. 4% of France's vineyards, or 34,000 hectares, are in the Champagne region. 319 villages and millions of bottles exported, right? So it's extremely significant. There's not just a small region that is not, exporting or producing in large numbers, tackling something like this. So the objective is by 2025 is to even further reduce that carbon footprint and be 100% sustainable viticulture. So since 2000, so it was about 15 years of data that was compiled for this. Already an improved and really distinct reduction in that carbon footprints. She mentioned, for example, making slightly lighter bottles, so they're easier and less heavy to transport. Taking away the use of synthetic applications in the vineyard, recycling your waste and your water, reducing the use of nitrogen fertilizer. So all of these things are being applied to get these results. Okay, so one of our first wine, the Larmandier-Bernier, and again, I said this, I don't know if everybody's in here, but if you would like to open your bottle and you're already sipping at home, I encourage that. You don't have to wait for me to get there. But this is a biodynamic producer. And I chose to just use the Demeter logo because they are a global certifying body that will go ahead and certify a certain farm product as biodynamic. And biodynamics was kind of a method conceived back in the 1920s, adopted by Rudolf Steiner, and has since been adopted, and not just for wine, but for all kinds of agricultural products around the world. So Demeter itself, this is a brand name for products that do biodynamic farming, and in this logo and this brand is used by strictly controlled licensees, right? So what that means is if you want to be Demeter certified, it is expensive. You have to pay to have your land assessed. Of course, you have to renew that every so often. There's a percentage that you will pay based off of the income made from those products that you have certified as biodynamic. If you want to add another property to it, of course, you pay again for all of that. So when you start to add up the cost of becoming Demeter certified, it can be prohibitive for maybe smaller companies, smaller farmers, smaller growers. And of course, you can be biodynamic without being Demeter certified, and there are. It will come down to then as the producer, farmer, grower, and saying, I know what I'm doing, obeys these biodynamic rules and philosophies, and I don't need the label. And in fact, we will see that with our wine whenever we get there in just a moment. But the basics of organics, which is really just, care for the land by using no form of harmful substance. So, think about the health of the soil, health of the water, health of the plants and the animal life around you, and you're really restricting the use of pesticides and herbicides. So biodynamic and organic do start from the same sort of foundation. You could, in fact, say that all biodynamic is organic, but not all organic is biodynamic. There's another level of complexity, a little bit of a layer of additional things that would make a biodynamic farmer set themselves apart from just organic. So there's a whole books written about them, not just one, but multiple books. But just a couple of things that I always find to be interesting is the creation of special composts and spray preparations. These includes, everything is kind of just recycled and put back into the land. So sprays, homemade from manure. And in this DIY period of 2020, I wonder if more people aren't going to start doing things like this. Like we're making our own furniture, we're making banana bread. Who knows? Maybe we'll be making our own fertilizers eventually. And Demeter is a certifying association. Their standards say that livestock is mandatory on farms, so that when you do need to apply these naturally derived fertilizers, for example, you have them right there, and you know what that animal ate because it's just an ongoing cycle. Yeah, so John has a great question. The choice of yeast used for fermentation effect being identified as natural. Yes, the biodynamic producers will say that all yeasts, and even some sustainable producers, that the yeasts used will be indigenous, that is naturally occurring on the grape skins. But for something like champagne, you really do have to, for the second fermentation, right? You're going to have to add a little bit of yeast and the food for the yeast, the sugar, into the wine in order to create the second fermentation in bottle. So that is, it has to be man-made. It has to be derived, not quite so naturally as the ones that occur on the grape skins or in the vineyard or in the winery. The Larmandier-Bernier is biodynamic certified. Yeah, so this is a really great question, and it's a little bit of a tricky one to answer, Julia, so I'm glad that you brought it up. On the bottle, which we might as well go ahead and pull it out, everybody. If you don't have it in front of you already, I have mine chilling in the cooler next to me. So if you look at the label, there is no, there's no Demeter certification, there's no indication of any logo from a certifying body on the label. They have been practicing for 20 years. On their website, it says that in 2003 they became bio-certified, which I'm going to explain what that is actually. If we go to, yeah, right here. So here's a couple of kind of organizing or controlling bodies that can certify for organics and biodynamics. So this AB, this kind of Bio-Agricultural Biologique, is a certification specific to organic products produced in France. And again, that biodynamic is kind of the next level of organics. In 2012, it was stated that the European logo for organic products must be present on the label to claim designation. At that point, the AB, which has been around since 1985, they said that, okay, that is optional. If you are bio-certified, you can put on the label if it means that much to you. If you choose not to, it's entirely up to you. But this bottle doesn't have either. So if it's obligatory to have it on here, it becomes a little bit of a gray area. So in this case, because Larmandier-Bernier has been practicing for more than 20 years, or about 20 years now, these principles of biodynamics, you could posit that he sort of was grandfathered in. So he's making these wines, but doesn't have to or isn't including this logo on the label because it is not present on the bottle. If you look at the front and you look at the back, usually it would be somewhere on the back of the label indicating that it has been certified as such, and it does not state that. Biodynamic champagne uses a different sulfite than other champagne. Yeah, so in this case, what they're saying with the application of sulfites is there are sulfites that naturally occur during the winemaking process, and no additional sulfites are added there. Oh, Julie, you have the EU Bio logo on yours. Okay, that is very interesting. So, because I asked Brenda earlier if she could check. So, I admit it's a little bit difficult to navigate the bio site, the EU site, the biodivin. There are a number of different bodies that kind of all want the same thing, right? They want respect for the land. They want to do good things for their land, but they're not comprehensive. And so what I'm wondering, Julia, because you're participating from France, right? You're in Paris right now? It's could be then that the bottles that are just imported into the United States are not required to have it on there, but if the bottles are kept within the EU, it should be on there. So yeah, I would like to see a picture of that. So then, okay, you're in France. And then, so next question, Julia, is the AB or the Bio logo on it? It's no AB. Okay, so it sounds like, yes, so they are indeed, they're not just saying that, they are indeed certified, and by law they're required. So they have this logo on those bottles. Chosen not to use the AB because it's not obligatory, and our bottles here that have been brought in don't have it on it. Okay, that's great to know. Thank you so much for including that. I don't know if anybody else is drinking from outside of the country, so we might not have realized that at all. Brenda is asking if it's a different base wine. So if it's natural champagne, say biodynamic in this example, the making of the base wine is done with that approach to biodynamics. So no use of pesticides or herbicides. Biodynamic practices and philosophies are applied throughout the vineyards and the winemaking, and so that includes the base wine as well, and any wine that will be used to top up after disgorgement. Questions, guys? I said ask a lot of questions, and you are not disappointing. So there is just the last one. Actually, let's talk about the winery first, so that we can be sharing our experience with the wine. Then we can go and look at some of the other certifications. So. Domaine Larmandier-Bernier is a family, owned and operated. It has been in the family for 8 generations, and they've been practicing biodynamic viticulture for 20 years, and yeah, they have that bio certification since the year 2003. So their approach, and this is a picture of one of their vineyards, so you can see they allow for the cover of grass here, and that is one of the things that's especially important for here in Champagne, is that this can be quite a wet region, and so by having grasses down here between the rows of vines, they can kind of deflect a little bit of the moisture that might otherwise make the grapes too wet, and things like mold and mildew can occur as a result. And remember, if you're not using herbicides, you cannot combat any sort of mold or mildews in that unnatural way. So it just has this very kind of natural green, very organic looking row of grass in there between the vines. So a part of their philosophy, and for anybody that has not visited this website yet, I encourage you to do so. They're clearly very passionate about their winemaking. Yeah, they'll use indigenous yeast to do their initial fermentation to create the base wine. They don't do any fining or filtering, so they let the particles, if it's going to be removed, it'll settle just naturally by gravity, and no use of any chemical applications in the vineyard. And one of the things that they included in their description of their approach to the winemaking is that each day attention is paid to each action. So they don't set this idea that we want to make great wines and we'll do it biodynamically. Okay, let's get there in 6 months. Hopefully we've gotten from start to finish of where we want to be. They really are going into the vineyards and putting this into practice. So their whole vineyard area is not so big. I have to do the calculations because it's 45 acres, which is roughly 18 hectares of land. And all of their fruit is estate fruits, all coming from Premier and Grand Cru vineyards. So what this means is they do not buy fruit from any other grower. There are growers who are certified organic or sustainable that will sell that organic fruit to larger producers. But in this case, they have chosen not to. They use exclusively their own fruit, so they can see everything that's going into it from start to finish, from grape to glass, essentially. So this is the Longitudes Premier Crus, Extra Brut, Blanc de Blanc. We're going to talk a little bit about labeling terms later on, but essentially a Blanc de Blanc is a wine made from only white grapes from the Champagne region. So this is 100% Chardonnay. And the natural alcoholic fermentation and malolactic actually takes place in wood casks. And that's which, Philippe Larmandier his idea is that lets the wine to breathe. It doesn't suffocate it in any airtight stainless steel tanks. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just catching up on one thing before we move too far along, because I think that the logo on the label is super interesting. If we're not the EU, we're not obliged to have the star logo. Okay, yeah, that makes total sense if you see it and we don't. Brenda's saying extra delicious, so good. She took my advice and went ahead. So go ahead and start smelling. I did pour mine just right before we started, so it came up to temperature just a little bit, which I'm enjoying quite a lot right now, but it's not as chilled as I like to drink it normally, but it's very expressive in the glass. And I've also chosen, not only is this my Florida Wine Academy glass, but I did opt for just a wine glass as opposed to a flute, because I'm really sticking my nose in there and trying to get some aromas out of it. So this wine was made with extended lease contacts. Their idea is that this is the best way to allow the wines to mature, and then an additional 2 years of maturation after that second fermentation in the bottle. They disgorge this wine by hand, which is a really interesting thing to see. Some smaller producers will still do this. Nowadays, most will do it in kind of a larger scale where you freeze the neck of the bottle and it's more mechanized, but doing it actually by hands takes some time. Although I did watch a video, just very easy to find, kind of like manual disgorgement champagne. And there was a great video of a gentleman who had clearly been doing this for a long time, because he just took the bottle, has the crown cap, he stuck it into like a little, like a container that was not a shelf, but it had a lid over it, so that he put his hands into the hole there. He had what looked just like a bottle cap remover for a beer bottle, a little bit more hefty than that, and just quickly removed it. The pressure inside ejects the yeast that had been hand riddled into the neck there, and then he just put his thumb over it, put it down. Then there are the next processes are more mechanized, because you have to quickly top it off, and then you have to put the cork in. And doing that by machine is, of course, much easier and more efficient. But to actually disgorge it by hand is a pretty special thing to do. Larger houses might still do that with some of their top cuvées, but I don't see that so much, and so I think that's a pretty special thing. À la volée, yeah, exactly, Maria Jose, à la volée. And Julia, I wish you could chime in. Perhaps your French accent is a little bit better than mine. I try. And yes, Côte Blanc, Marcos, thank you. So that is where their vineyards are situated there, which is a great part of Champagne for growing Chardonnay. So just 3 grams per liter of dosage. It is an extra brut. And they feel that, you don't need so much sugar in these wines. That it was permitted to go through partial malolactic fermentation. So the acidity is not so bracing and racy and austere as some Blanc de Blancs can be. Yeah, and you can taste the chalk, exactly. I'll stop talking for just a second and take a sip. Now, you can absolutely taste the chalk, and that's one of the things that they pride themselves on, is having that really chalky mineral addition to the fruit and to the other components of the wine. So they've had Blanc de Blanc champagnes, Chardonnay, the fruits, things like lemon and orchard fruit, green fruits like apple and pear are really common, and it's not surprising to find those here in the wine. But coming from Premier Cru sites, which means it should be a better site. The fruit was historically valued at better than the non-Premier Cru sites, coming from those villages rather. So think about the optimal ripeness, and one of the reasons that producers or farmers do continue to work biodynamically is whether that seems a little bit too far-fetched for hardcore scientists, or it seems a little bit too wonky for people that say, oh, sustainability is fine, organics is fine, we don't have to take it to the next level. But the proof is in the wine, so to speak. So it's very pure on the nose. There's a lot of, it's almost like a lemon yogurt, lemon zest, so really concentrated, like the oils that can come off of the skin when you kind of twist it. If you were using it for a cocktail garnish, you get that really intense lemon aroma. Some very ripe pear. And I personally love pears. If I had to choose apple over pear, I'll take a pear anytime. Just personal preference. But there's a really, kind of ripe, fresh picked orchard fruit component to it. And what else? I want to see what you, and everybody should, be able to smell that kind of brioche, the presence of that extended lees aging. And there's even a little bit of like hazelnuts almost. There's like just a little hint of nuttiness to the wine as well. Yeah. Okay, so Erica is mentioning upshot of biodynamic, the taste and or the health aspect. Yes, people who taste wines made biodynamically, and I can say for sure, I think that this champagne is really delicious. Not that champagnes that are produced in non-biodynamic manners cannot also be delicious. But if you can have, a very good or outstanding quality champagne, and you're doing something that you believe is good for your land, for your family, and part of that goes into the sustainability aspect as well, is that what you're doing now, you'll feel the effects of that years later. So do you want to have positive effects Or do you want to be worried that you've been, dosing your land with too many pesticides and herbicides, and now the water is unsafe and that water impacts the wildlife around you? You can really see a difference. I think that video showed, and of course they were going to take their video footage on the best days when it was sunny, when everything was green and in bloom. But that's real, that was a real image of healthy vineyards and the kind of things that you can expect. So I do think, and that's kind of what the healthy component is, right? Alcohol should never be considered healthy. A couple glasses a day, no problem, but excessive drinking, everyone will say that's not necessarily good for your health. But if you can, consume it in this more organic way, sure, that's a little bit healthy than knowing that you're consuming pesticides or herbicides, which happens all the time. Okay, so Julie's mentioning the almond-like. Yes, there's a little bit of a nutty component. Almonds for sure. I was getting kind of like a raw hazelnut. Yeah. Spices, white pepper with the pear. Okay. Yeah. And the brioche. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very. All of those things. I had in my notes like an apple brioche. So you kind of have this like almost like a baked apple, golden apple in with the kind of bready pastry aromas. Okay, yeah, the toasted almonds, mouth-watering saltiness. Yes, for anybody that is feeling like that little touch of salinity on the finish, I absolutely agree. And think about the mouthfeel, right? We always think champagne to have these, really nice, refreshing, high, crisp acidity levels. And it is here, but it's so balanced. And sometimes when you have these really high, tight levels of acidity, a little bit of a higher dosage can balance that out to the point where most consumers won't taste or feel residual sugar. The wine is certainly not sweet if it's still brut. But only 3 grams per liter of the dosage, it's almost nothing. And you don't need anything more to balance out the rest of the structure in this wine. Yeah. Crisp green apple in the finish, love it. So very complex. Frank, you're asking the base wine for the bottle that we have open. Do you mean what is the composition? Oh, the base year. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I see you have the cuvee contains 40% reserve wines. I am not sure, actually. It is a great question, and I would be happy to look that up after and answer it. I can always send an email with but that, I know for the next champagne we taste, they mentioned, I think 4 and 6 for their base, and yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll check that there from the batch number. It is a great question. I'm sorry that I didn't think to have that for you. Really good technical question. You're teaching me something, because some webinars we don't get too technical. We don't want to go down that road if people don't find it interesting, but it's good to know. I don't know, maybe since we have an almost champagne master in here, my friend, I won't name her, so I'm not going to call her out, but you know who you are. If anybody wants to check that and let us know, I would love to have that. Okay, Frank, it's a gold star for a very good question. And Julia gets also a gold star for the logos and for letting us know about how they're located after the session. Okay, Perpetual Reserve started in 2004. Yeah. All right, so we'll do a little bit more sleuthing and try to find the deep technical information. I appreciate that there are people who really want to know all of that, and why not? It really tells us, if you look at this information and kind of break it down, so all right, the fermentation took place in casks, so maybe that's where we're getting this nutty complexity from, and the malolactic fermentation, there is a little bit of a softer acid profile, and yeah, just a little hint of that citrus was almost like a lemon yogurt, not overly creamy and certainly no buttery component, but you can really start to break it apart, the efforts that went into this, and smell them and taste them. Okay. 2015 vintage, good. Oh, and Gina will also be a champagne master. Great, excellent, good. I'll call on you both from now on. So final opinion, What do you think of the longitude? Everybody is happy? One. Okay, yeah, great to pair with cheese. This would be good with something that's not super fresh, like just a goat cheese, and also not too pungent, like a blue cheese. I see like kind of like a Jarlsberg or a mild Gouda in there. Good. All right. I love Gina's enthusiasm. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about extra food and wine pairing at the end, and I'm always happy to hear what everybody. If you're eating something at home with the champagnes, or you're trying something, or you have a tried and true recommendation, definitely let me know. Okay, so let me just jump back really quick to this. You know, if somebody wants to say that they are sustainable and be certified as such, right? Because you can certainly employ sustainable practices in your vineyards, in your everyday life, and you don't have to necessarily wear a badge to let people know that. So the Champagne region, as we saw with that, you know, the video and the slides, they said they kind of started taking statistics around 2000. The region, they've been committed to the sustainable wine growing practices since 2001. And there is the Viticulture Durable en Champagne, or the VDC, is a certification that was introduced by the Comité Champagne in 2014. So, you know, the practices have been in place for quite some time, you know, 19 years now, but the actual certification is a little bit newer. And it is a voluntary approach. Because with all of these, you know, certification applications and being granted the right to append these kind of labels, or logos rather, to your label, it always comes with a cost. And for anybody that wants to certify themselves, you know, you're following the same steps as maybe your neighbor or the person down the road from you. And the philosophy remains the same, right? There's that commitment to the biodiversity. You saw, like, it's great having animals and insects present in your vineyard is a sign of health. They want to be there. There's nothing, you know, leaching into the ground or into the nearby water sources to scare them away. Reducing that carbon footprint and water footprint, recycling water, you know, trying to make their whole approach more efficient, you know, employing solar panels, lighter bottles, all of those, you know, reusing any sort of waste material that you can, anything that's organic, and just putting it back into either your land or selling it. It's even going into cosmetics, from what I understand. But it is a pretty demanding process. So it's about, so if you were to look at the whole application, I didn't bring it all up, but there are approximately 120 points, things to consider when getting yourself, you know, having this certification. So it is a very demanding process. Audits have to be done by an independent party. So all of that, what I'm really saying is there is definitely a certain cost involved. So if you are, you know, confident and comfortable in your sustainable winemaking practices, and you don't want to go after the certification, you simply wouldn't, and that doesn't take anything away from how you make your wines. But on the other hand, there are, you know, producers, or, and it's not just with the sustainable, but with the biodynamic, you know, certified organic, it takes some time and it takes some money, and so not everybody is even able to do that. Right. Louisa said the food pairing champagne perfectly matched the famous Brazilian food. I'm afraid I'll butcher that, but I'm going to say it because it is a safe place. Coxina? I'll ask Alessandra tomorrow if I pronounce that correctly. Champagne goes with everything. All right. And I see you're kind of on the same page. Awesome. Okay. Good. I love this, hearing from you guys. And it's starting to make me a little bit hungry, which happens with the bubbles. And just to wrap up on this slide, there is another, you know, there's the DEMETER, that's global. There's also the biodynamic, which they accept only properties that are farmed entirely biodynamically already. They've been around since about 1995. This is not just restricted to France. It's France, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, and Portugal. So it's a number, and it's not restricted to Champagne either. There are biodynamic certified Champagne producers, but also for wine and other products as well. If you are, champagne lovers, insane for champagne crazy, all of the above, these are just a couple of additional producer names. There are many that do practice either, the certified organic or biodynamic. Drapier, Fleury, Laval, Roederer is a big one that's committed to sustainability in champagne. So there is definitely a movement towards more people thinking this way and farming this way and producing this way than not. And just the last one, look at all this bureaucracy and telling all these groups and the forms and the things you have to do to belong. But that's, it's just out there. There's the last group is the Association des Champagnes Biologiques, or ACB. And it's they're a group of like-minded people who are committed to organic practices in the region. There's about 92 houses and growers, so some are already producing. Some are just the growers who are growing the grapes for contribution to larger houses that are, their aim is to unify various fields to organic winemaking in Champagne. And they organize educational training for producers, whether or not they're certified organic. So people that are not already certified are welcome. But they're also really, they look hard for people who are using terms like certified organic in their marketing or promotion on their websites, and making sure that that's really true. So they're not just looking to protect the land, but also the authenticity or the legitimacy of saying I am certified organic. So if you're interested in visiting their website, they have a little link that you can follow that's like legal reminder, essentially. And there you will see that, yes, if you want to call yourself certified organic, you have to have these logos on your label for the EU, and you have to really be certified. Otherwise, somebody will watch and probably tell you. Yeah, so Julia, everybody is either certified or in the process of being certified. And so that's kind of what they do, is they are committed to organic, and it can be a little bit hard to say, like, we're maybe not just minding our own business, we're checking to make sure that people who state this as something about themselves, it's really indeed true. It's not, they're not just out policing, they're trying to, and when, unifying these various fields, it's people who are growing, producing, but also, just working kind of in the transportation of maybe these grapes or the wines or anything that could be involved in champagne making in the region, could be, a member of this group if they want. So they're there to promote and teach, and they hold these classes to help support as well, because it takes years actually to fully convert. So they say pretty much from the time you commit your vineyard and say, I'm going to go certified organic, it wouldn't really be true. You couldn't receive that AB certification until the fourth harvest after your commitment, or roughly like 36 months plus however long it takes to fill out all that paperwork. And then for the Champagne AOC to say, yes, indeed, you are certified organic, to acknowledge that, you have to be in your second vintage after that. So there's approximately 6 years between commitment and being able to sell your wine under the certified organic label. So in all that time, you need support, right? You need expertise. How do I go about doing it? How much is this going to cost me? And it seems to me that this is, the group that promotes all of those things. Okay, so all of our wines tonight are coming from grapes that are sourced from Premier or Grand Cru sites, or sorry, these are Premier Cru. The producers also do Grand Cru wines. So we are tasting their Premier Cru. So just to kind of give a little bit of an explanation, the Échelle des Crus, originally established as a fixed pricing structure in Champagne in 1911. Nowadays, they are the price, per or the price affixed to the grapes, the values, is settled by individual contracts. But the idea behind this all is that, so 318 villages are quality rated, and on the slide in the beginning it said 319 villages. So that's coming from champagne.com. 318 is coming from my French wine scholar book. I apologize about the discrepancy. If anybody knows for sure who is right, I'm guessing it's the 319, but feel free to throw that in the comments. So essentially, any village that's producing grapes that would fall below this kind of 80th percentage level wouldn't be included into Champagne AOC wines, because they do use this rating system. It's kind of set up 0 to 100 or 1 to 100. So any just, you know, village that's rated between 80 and 89 would be just, you know, a non-premier or non-Grand Cru village. There are 44 Premier Cru villages, so they would be ranked anywhere between 90 and 99%, and 17 Grand Crus, that would be like a perfect 100%. And these 17, the villages are all located in the Montagne des Rums, the Côtes Blancs, and the Vallée de la Marne. So if you see Premier Cru or Grand Cru designation on the label, it means that, you know, the producer can blend from different Premier and different Grand Cru sites. So you can have grapes from multiple sites of that designation. So it doesn't automatically signify a single vineyard. Okay. 319 is the most recent, and past the 42 Premier Crus. All right, so that might be in the newest French wine scholar manual to be updated, or maybe in the Champagne Master. So it's things are always changing. Let's real quick talk about Champagne de Lassalle. I'm going to go back to the labeling terms in just a moment, but we might as well get the next champagne in our glass. De Lassalle was started by Jules Lassalle in 1942. It is another family-owned and operated smaller house. Third generation Angeline Templier started as winemaker in 2006. So you have 3 generations. This is Olga, Jules's wife, and the daughter Chantrelle, and then the granddaughter Angeline Templier. So it's, you know, 3 generations, and an all-female team at least leading the house. And their kind of self-logo is une femme, un esprit, un style. 1 female, 1 spirit, and 1 style. And so, yeah, not only are they're sustainable producers, but I do enjoy that it's got this 3rd generation kind of female power driving the house. So they have about 45 parcels of land spread over 16 hectares. So again, you know, this is all estate fruit, just like the Larmandier-Bernier. So they are not buying and bringing anything in. And that way they have, you know, as with the first wine, total control over what happens, you know, from the grape to the glass. So their philosophy is that, yeah, we own all of our lands, so they are all of our grapes. They want to stick to kind of a traditional approach to winemaking and champagne as possible. And then they age all of their wines for a minimum of 5 years. They produce only from the cuvée. I'm so sorry for that typo. It should be cuvée, not, it looks kind of like, I don't know, if one of the newer hip-hop artists was to come out with a champagne, they might name it like the Couve to Juice. But this is essentially the first press, right? So what they do is from all these various parcels, they'll harvest them. They are pressed and vinified separately before going on to the blending. And so that cuvée is the very first juice that comes from the press. So it's kind of done in the most gentle to give you the purest expression of the grapes there. And they are still using the original basket press that was installed more than 50 years ago. So that is their, you know, they're definitely holding on to a traditional application of winemaking. And their total annual production is only about 120,000 bottles. So if you were to look at, I think it was Louis Roeder did about 3.5 million bottles. The last that count was calculated. So really, really small production. So let's on my next one. So this is the Champagne Premier Cru Cuvée Preference. They do, for this particular cuvée, it's 60% Pinot Meunier, 20% Chardonnay, 20% Pinot Noir. So they are emphasizing a little bit more of that unique fruit. Their blend, of course, changes from year to year to accommodate their vintage conditions. You know, with their sustainable approaches to winemaking, they might not have as much total control over being able to accommodate a more difficult vintage. So that is, that's kind of their general recipe, if you will, the blend composition for this wine, but it will vary from year to year. They also do manual riddling and disgorgement, so they use the traditional kind of riddling tables, and once they're ready to disgorge, they do that all manually as well. It spans 48 months on the lees prior to disgorgements. And yeah, they're never released younger than 5 years. For their vintages, it's about 10 years. So, a little bit more dosage here, 8 grams per liter, so it is still brut. So yeah, if you happen to be enjoying with 2 different glasses and you're going back to the Larmandier-Bernier, you should notice a big difference between this, Blanc de Blanc, and then this wine that has a good proportion of Meunier in addition to the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Because the nose is more about kind of like wild berries. I think about wild strawberries, a little bit of cherry. Oh, lemon drop, I like that, Brenda. I like that. Yeah, there's a little bit of a fruitier sense coming right out of the glass. And from the website, one thing that they like to mention is that the Pinot Noir coming from their vineyard sites can express this little bit of like a fennel or licorice. So if you get something that's kind of like an herbal or spice note. Yeah. So their vineyards are located in the Montagne de Reims. So a little bit of a different location, and we are going to go back really quickly to, yeah, just the map here. So to give you an idea, the Larmandier-Bernier is here in the Côte de Blancs, and then you have the Montagne de Reims just a little bit over here, which is where the J. Lassalle vineyard is based. Yeah, it is a little bit herbal. I can really get that little hint of fennel there. It's so delicious. So both on the nose, a little bit less on the palate. It has a little touch of floral notes to it as well, and some stone fruits. So like a yellow fruit, like a peach, a little bit in there. Yeah, and some of those berries. Neighbors to Beyonce and Jay-Z. Gina, is that you? Do you wanna partner up and kind of pitch our idea about the new fancy cuvée name? Yeah, I agree, Brenda. Some wild berries, like a strawberry, a little bit of blackberry on the palate. And from those red fruits, that little bit of herbal notes, kind of like a baked golden apple as well. So it's has a little bit more of that like kind of softness to it. Fruit. All right, so while everyone is sipping, I'm just going to go back again, a couple of slides here. Yeah, so just kind of a reminder of these, some labeling terms you might see, and one really important one to help you identify which style you're going to be purchasing would be the dosage. Everything from brut nature, where essentially no additional sugar is added after disgorgement, extra brut up to 6 grams per liter, the brut up to 12 grams per liter, and then you start to have noticeable levels of residual sugar in the wine. Most common and you know, it seems most popular by consumer preferences would be these drier styles. I think Brut is probably the most common, plenty of extra Brut though also being produced. We had that just a moment ago. And then the Brut Nature is if you really don't want any sugar topped up. I think the legal maximum there is about 0.3%. So really truly zero. And again, that little bit of sugar dosage can, you know, kind of help enhance the fruits, maybe like round out or help balance out the higher levels of acidity, just to create a little bit more of a balanced mouth feel and flavor palette. So here, you know, with the 8 grams per liter of residual sugar, it's 5 more than the first champagne, but as Gina pointed out, there's some very fruity aromas, but on the palate, and it just gets better as it sits in the glass, but you don't have any perception of residual sugar. You know, if you were going to do our kind of famous tongue test and you dip the tip of your tongue into the wine, you would not feel that kind of tingling sensation of residual sugar. So vintage, non-vintage, these are both non-vintage champagnes or multi-vintage. Right? You might see Blanc de Blanc, which we had the first wine. So it's a white wine made entirely from white grapes, or a Blanc de Noir, which is a white wine made from the red grapes, either Meunier or Pinot Noir or both. So those are pretty typical. What is a little bit less obvious, and you really had to look for it, I had to look pretty hard to find them, are these kind of abbreviations. These are just 2 I wanted to kind of show the examples of that will kind of tell you what kind of producer you are buying from. So both of our champagnes tonight are like a grower champagne. That means that they have used only their own fruit. It's all estate fruit. So they've had a hand in step 1 to drinking the champagne. And they don't bring in fruit from anybody else. So it's a producer vinifying only his or her own estate-grown grapes. They do not purchase from others. And if you, for right now, since I have the Lassalle out, right at the bottom where you have the name of the wine preference, it shows you its Premier Cru. Below the Premier Cru is the volume, 750 milliliters. If you go immediately to the left of that, you see a tiny little RM followed by the batch number there. So pretty special to have, 2 grower champagnes. Another abbreviation that you might see is NM, Negociants, Manipulant. It's a producer that incorporates grapes purchased from others, typically because they need to. If it's a high volume or the big houses, it doesn't mean that they only buy fruit. They may also use their own fruit, but for some of the really big names out there, and then you know which ones I mean, and it's not a bad thing. Just we're here to promote our grower champagne tonight and the ones that we're drinking. But many of the other really big famous houses, because they have a much larger production every year, then they will need to purchase fruit from others. So now when you buy your champagnes, have a look for what is it? Is it a Negociant? Is it a Récoltant? And so not only doing kind of a sustainable or more natural, organic, biodynamic approach to winemaking, these are also grower champagnes with fruit sourced only from, Premier Cru vineyard sites. Yeah, and Brenda's saying grapefruit on the finish. Yeah, excellent. Almost getting a little bit of like a tropical fruit as well. So that yellow peach and like a fresh pineapple is coming on the palate now. Yeah, 2 years on the lease, 48 months is not, 4 years on the lease, 48 months is not insignificant at all, but it's really well integrated, right? It's not just the fruit that's present in the wine is really kind of all, it's assembled together so nicely. Because I felt and smelled and tasted a little bit more the lees in the first wine. Here it's certainly there. It's got that kind of like fruity brioche aroma and flavor, but the fruit really shines in this as well. Yeah. Very delicious. In this one, Julie, they do allow for malolactic fermentation in the wine. Yes, they do. So you can kind of feel that roundness and softness in the mouth. So it's still refreshing. It's still crisp. It's still very clean, but it's not, it's not so high level, bracing, racy acidity. And great value. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about these champagnes is, okay, so all told, what do we have here? We have these natural approaches to winemaking, so the sustainability practices are just always kind of a natural part of the philosophy of the Chez Lassalle. And you don't see these logos, and on the website, it does not state anything about having that certified sustainable from the certifying body in Champagne, and maybe they never will, because they don't have to tell us that. You can just sort of taste the quality of this wine and know that what they're doing in the vineyards and in the winery, and they're looking ahead and basically making sure that for their their brand, their business, it's not just them. They're already in their third generation. It should be there in 3 more generations. And if anything, it should just be better. That's this really great, I think, approach to sustainability. And you think first about kind of lands. Okay, how can I make this land still be green and have biodiversity, and have everything that I need for the soils, but also thinking about the people that you work with. Is your staff, are they going to be happy and healthy? And because everybody kind of has to have that like-minded attitude in order for these approaches to work. And so we see that. We see, it's family run, smaller production, grower champagnes, premier cru, vineyard sites, and a great price. And the champagnes are just delicious. Yeah. The Haute Valeur Environmentale. So Julia, I actually did not see anything about that in any of the sites or sources that I looked at. So I'm just going to make a quick note of that. For all of the different groups and certifying bodies, I actually didn't see that come up, but I'll go back and have another look and see if I can come up with something. Okay, so I kind of went with some things that I love, not only by themselves, but they just get better with champagne. So for me, sushi and champagne is my go-to. I think because I get to be a little bit self-indulgent. If I get to have both of those things at once. I love sushi, I love champagne. If I get to have them together, so for me, that's kind of like a birthday standard. I do these things for special occasions, but it's just, champagne works great with sushi because you have all different kinds of fish options, and sushi can have a lot of umami because of the seaweed. If you're using soy sauce, kind of like the raw fish will have these umami components, and champagne is a great pairing partner for dishes that have a lot of umami, because it doesn't really amplify any sort of bitterness. So you get this really nice, especially if you're having kind of a fattier fish, like a toro, the tuna belly, or some salmon. That kind of fatty oiliness will increase your perception of the fruit a little bit, help cleanse the palate. Oysters, of course, it's kind of, especially if you were to squeeze the lemon on there, so you have a little bit of acidity in the food, will balance out that acidity in the champagne. Not that it's so high, but when the champagnes are so balanced, now I just really want to drink some of that champagne. But when the acidity and in both the food and the wine is in balance, then what do you notice next? It's going to be the fruit and not so much the structure. Caviar, also a wonderful indulgence. A little bit of mushroom asparagus risotto. So love risotto, the kind of creamy texture and the little bit more like intense flavors, which will have some umami as well. So again, umami and a white, as in no tannin, wine is perfect. And then for desserts, because we know champagne is good from start to finish with a meal, I chose like a citrus cheesecake, because cheesecake is just one of my favorites. I'm not even really that big of a dessert person personally, but a little bit of toasted coconuts and some citrus in the base of the dessert, and there you go. You have my dream meal. Carl Bell's scrambled eggs and caviar for breakfast. I like your style. Cheese. Brenda, what about brisket and champagne? I don't know if you've ever had that, but it seems like it might be something that would be up your alley. Yeah. Good. This last little, gonna enjoy that one. Okay, so Zach is saying beef and champagne, fried chicken, yes. Having that kind of fatty, oily components. Champagne, again, cleanse your palate, get you prepared for the next bite. Potato chips, love it. The saltiness, good, yeah, because the fried chicken would be a little bit salty as well. Chicken Kiev, that's right, you made that recently, Brenda. Everything that's fried matches well. I agree. In fact, I kind of dropped the ball on that one. I could have included something. That's right, French fries, fried chicken. Mozzarella sticks, if you want to get really classy. I love mozzarella sticks. Popcorn, yeah. Popcorn with some salts, yes. So really, everything from breakfast food, truly, to desserts, to the starters, to the beef, to the fish, to the vegetarian options. Never forget the cheese. Have some potato chips. You can go classy, but you certainly don't have to. Right? If you only have the champagne at home and you haven't gone grocery shopping in a week, it's okay. The most important ingredient is on your table. Yeah. So of the two, did anybody have a preference? Was there one wine that, and no hard feelings, you know, this is always a safe place to give your opinion, one champagne that you preferred over the other, and why? Yeah, they're very different with their flavor profiles. So you could sit down and kind of enjoy a little mini flight again side by side and just continue to compare. And contrast both. Okay, everybody's being so diplomatic. They're both different. I like both. Oh, if I'm going to throw my honest one out there, I think it's the Lassalle that I like. But it's really hard. When I first tasted the Larmandier, it was that one, and then I tasted the Lassalle, and it was that one. So if I go back and taste, I guess I can see where everyone is coming from. Depends on the moods. Okay, the preference is the LB. Okay, yeah, Julia's unable to compare, but she's happy with what she has, so. Okay, great. Any other questions on what we covered tonight? Okay, I like Carl's feedback. So the first is better by itself, Lassalle with food. So yeah, what kind of tasting experience do you want to have? Okay, so I know what everybody else is doing the rest of the night. If you have some photos that you have taken of the bottles of your time here, please tag them in us. Miami Champagne Week, Florida Wine Academy, 305 Wines, all of the above. Any of them we'll happily repost. Really love to see how people are enjoying the wines. Yes, let us know. We want to be part of it so that we can kind of, it's always good to look back on pictures from previous Miami Champagne weeks. I know Brenda and I have got to do that, and it's just a wonderful trip down memory lane. So document this, and please share with us so that we can see. All right, you're good, Mary. Thank you so much. And again, for anybody that is friends with Mary Medina, see if that's still in her stories. I loved her presentation of us, the wine mats. I hope everybody's enjoying their champagne mats. They're so beautiful. So our general manager and co-founder, Guillermo DEMYSTIFIED, made those and made sure everybody got them. So it kind of like takes it up a little bit a notch, because this is truly a celebration of champagne. Thank you very much, Marie Jose. I'm so glad that you were able to be here. To everybody, fantastic group. Was really delighted to have you join me. As I said, we've been recording. I know that it seems like we may have lost a couple of people based on their needs at home. You can always rewatch and enjoy the rest of the week. I am going to enjoy the champagnes now in celebration. My sister's getting married on Thursday, so I won't be with you for the webinars. I will be with you in spirit. And wish everybody a fantastic rest of the week. Have a great time enjoying the champagnes. Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you, Louisa. Mary Dina, yes, next year in person. I will see you there. Let's sit next to each other at one of the events. Good, Gusto, I'm so glad. Yes, replay it. Absolutely. Bye, Fernanda and Antonio. Thank you so much. Zachary, Brenda, I miss you too. I'll see you when I get back after my quarantine period. Thank you so much, Deidre, Gina, everybody. Julia, thank you so much for your inputs. Thanks, Mary. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Have such a great night. Enjoy the rest of the wines, and I'll see you all very soon. Cheers.